Have you ever picked up a Bible and just wondered, how did this get here? I mean, how does a collection of ancient scrolls, written thousands of years ago, become the book that's sitting on a shelf today? Well, it's not just a simple story of copy and paste. It's really a detective story, a totally fascinating investigation into history, language, and, well, preservation.
Okay, so let's dive right into this mystery. The big question here is all about reliability. How can we be sure that the words we're reading today are actually what was written down millennia ago? That journey from ancient parchment to the modern book in your hands is just full of twists and turns and a few discoveries that are, frankly, incredible. You know, trying to verify the biblical text isn't just a matter of faith. It's a massive historical and scientific challenge. It really forces us to become textual detectives, piecing together clues left behind by scribes in ancient communities from centuries and centuries ago.
Now, the number one tool for these detectives is something called textual criticism. I know, it sounds super academic, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Modern Bibles aren't based on a single perfect ancient copy because, well, one doesn't exist. Instead, scholars have to carefully compare thousands of manuscript fragments, noting all the little differences to reconstruct the text as close to the original as they possibly can.
For the longest time, before a huge, game-changing discovery in the 20th century, these textual detectives had to rely on three main families of manuscripts. Think of them as three key witnesses that had somehow survived the long march of history.
So, let's meet our three primary witnesses. First up, you've got the Masoretic text. This is the standard Hebrew version that was finalized in the Middle Ages. Then there's the Septuagint, which is a much older Greek translation that was super important to early Christians. And finally, you have the Samaritan Pentateuch, a really unique version that only contains the first 5 books of the Bible. For centuries, these three were pretty much all our textual detectives had to go on.
But then, in 1947, everything, and I mean everything, changed. A chance discovery by a Bedouin shepherd in a cave near the Dead Sea, it would completely revolutionize our understanding of the Bible's history. It gave our detectives the single greatest clue they could have ever hoped for.
And this timeline really shows you just how massive this discovery was. Look at this. The Dead Sea Scrolls were written around the time of Jesus, but our best Hebrew manuscripts before that, the Masoretic text, were from around 900 AD. All of a sudden, this one discovery bridged a silent gap of more than 1,000 years. It was literally like finding a time capsule. And we're not talking about just a few little fragments here. Among the thousands of pieces of parchment found in those Qumran caves, there were manuscripts for every single book of the Old Testament except for Esther. That's over 230 biblical manuscripts in total. The sheer amount of new evidence was just staggering.
So, what did this treasure trove of ancient texts actually tell us? Well, the answer was profound. And in some ways, it kind of pointed in two different directions at once. It both confirmed what we thought we knew and challenged some really long-held assumptions. Okay, so the first truth was one of just remarkable stability. The scrolls proved that the Masoretic text, our main Hebrew source, had been copied with incredible, mind-boggling accuracy for over a millennium. But the second truth was just as important. The scrolls also showed that other versions of the text existed right alongside the one that would eventually become our standard. Ancient diversity wasn't the theory anymore, it was a fact.
And this completely changed the verdict on those other witnesses, like the Septuagint. For centuries, whenever the Greek version differed from the Hebrew one, scholars just kind of assumed the Greek translators had been sloppy or careless. But the Dead Sea Scrolls proved that wasn't true. They show that the Septuagint was often a really faithful translation of a real ancient Hebrew text that was just different. Suddenly, it was a totally authentic witness in its own right.
So this isn't just some academic exercise. All this detective work has a real impact. It allows modern translators to get closer to the original text than ever before. And sometimes they can even restore words that were lost to time.
Okay, take Isaiah 53:11. For centuries, this is how the verse read, based on that Masoretic text. It's a powerful line about a suffering servant, right? There's this sense of resolution, but it comes after deep pain.
But a scroll of Isaiah found at Qumran, it contained one extra word, light. And this reading was also supported by the Old Greek Septuagint. He shall see light and be satisfied. That one little word completely changes the tone. It shifts the prophecy from just enduring pain to one of hope, of revelation, of illumination. and a lot of modern Bibles now include it.
All right, here's another fascinating puzzle for you. Psalm 145 is what's called an acrostic. It's basically an ABC poem. Each new verse is supposed to start with the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. But for centuries, in the Masoretic text, one letter, the letter Nun, was just gone. The whole verse was missing.
And then, you guessed it, the Dead Sea Scrolls provided the missing line. God is faithful in all his words and gracious in all his deeds. It fit perfectly. It completed the poem's structure. And get this, the very verse that was restored by finding this ancient text is a verse about God's faithfulness in his words. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. It's just incredible.
So the really crucial point here is that this entire detective story, this whole journey through ancient manuscripts and desert caves and scholarly debates, it isn't just about ancient history. It has some really profound implications for anybody reading the Bible today.
So why does all this matter? Well, first, it builds confidence. The evidence shows an incredible story of careful preservation across thousands of years. Second, it leads to a much deeper understanding. Those little restorations, like the word light in Isaiah, they aren't just technical fixes. They enrich the theological meaning of the whole text. And finally, it should just be an encouragement. Knowing the immense, multi-generational effort that went into preserving these words, it gives us a whole new appreciation for the remarkably reliable text we get to hold in our hands.